Dr. Linda Parker rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the massive screen showing deep space signals coming into Earth's biggest listening station in Colorado Springs. The night shift was always quiet, with only the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of coffee brewing in the break room. She had been working at the Extraterrestrial Communications Division for 12 years and had never found anything more exciting than random space noise or signals from human colonies on Mars and Europa. Tonight felt different, though, as if something important was about to happen. The time was exactly 3:47 a.m. when her computer started making sounds she had never heard before. A series of beeps and clicks filled the room, followed by what sounded like music mixed with electronic noise. Linda sat up straight in her chair and began recording everything while her heart started beating faster. The signal was coming from somewhere very far away, much farther than any human ship had ever traveled. She called her assistant, Pete Williams, who was sleeping in the next room, and told him to come quickly. Pete arrived wearing his pajamas and looking confused until he heard the strange sounds coming from the speakers. They both stared at the screen as numbers and symbols appeared, showing that the signal was coming from a star system called Kepler 442, which was over 1,000 light years away from Earth. The signal was not just random noise. It had patterns and seemed to be trying to communicate something important. Linda used the computer to break down the different parts of the message and slowly began to understand what she was hearing. The first part seemed to be mathematical equations, probably to show that whoever was sending the message was intelligent and could do complex thinking. After working for 6 hours straight, Linda and Pete managed to decode part of the message. What they found made them both very scared and excited at the same time. The message was a distress call from alien beings who called themselves the Vellani. They were asking for help from something they called Category 12 Deathworlders, and according to their data, humans were exactly that type of creature. The Vellani explained in their message that they were a peaceful group of different alien species who had been living together in space for thousands of years. They traded goods, shared knowledge, and helped each other solve problems without fighting. Their message said they had been watching Earth for a long time and had put humans in a special category because of how dangerous their home planet was. Earth was classified as a death world because it had so many things that could kill living creatures. Violent storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, dangerous animals, diseases, and radiation from space made Earth one of the most hostile planets the Vellani had ever studied. Most alien species came from much safer worlds, where the biggest danger might be a small earthquake once every 100 years. The aliens explained that creatures from death worlds, like Earth, developed special abilities that other species did not have. They became very good at fighting, surviving in terrible conditions, and making quick decisions when their lives were in danger. The Vellani had studied humans during their wars and exploration of space, and were impressed by how well they could adapt to new situations. Now, the Vellani needed help because another alien species called the Harvesters had started attacking their worlds. The Harvesters were described as creatures that ate everything they could find, including other intelligent beings. They had already destroyed 17 Vellani planets and were moving toward the main Vellani homeworld where billions of peaceful aliens lived. The message included detailed information about Vellani technology, star maps showing how to reach there, space, and blueprints for building faster spaceships and better weapons. They were offering to share all of this knowledge with humans if Earth would send military help to fight the Harvesters. The technology they were offering could advance human civilization by hundreds of years and give people the ability to travel to any part of the galaxy. Linda knew this was the most important discovery in human history. She immediately called her boss, Dr. Carl Martinez, who lived 30 minutes away from the station. Carl arrived wearing a bathrobe and looking angry about being woken up until Linda showed him the decoded message. His expression changed from annoyance to complete shock as he read through the alien communication. Within 2 hours, the message had been sent to the highest levels of Earth's government. President Helen Rodriguez was woken up in the White House and briefed about the situation by her top advisors, the Secretary of Defense, the head of the Space Force, and the director of the Global Security Council, all gathered in the situation room to discuss what humanity should do. Some officials were very suspicious about the message. They worried it might be a trap designed to lure human ships far away from Earth so that other aliens could attack the planet while it was undefended. Others pointed out that humans had no proof the Velani were telling the truth about anything, including whether the harvesters even existed. However, the technology information included in the message was real and could be tested. Human scientists immediately began studying the blueprints and found that they described machines and energy systems that were far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. The math and science were correct, which meant the aliens really did have the knowledge they claimed to possess. Commander Jake Morrison of Earth's United Defense Fleet was called to the White House to give his opinion about whether humans could fight an unknown alien enemy in space. Jake was a tall man with gray hair who had commanded ships during the Mars Colony Wars when Earth had to fight rebels trying to take control of human settlements on the Red Planet. Jake studied the message carefully and told the president that fighting in space against unknown enemies was extremely dangerous. Human ships were designed for traveling between planets in the solar system, not for fighting wars across thousands of light years. However, he also said that humans had one big advantage over most other species, because they had been fighting wars for their entire history and knew how to adapt quickly to new types of combat. The debate in the Situation Room lasted for 8 hours. Some advisors wanted to send a small scout ship first to see if the Velani message was real. Others suggested trying to communicate more with the aliens before making any decisions about military action. A few officials argued that Earth should ignore the message completely and focus on defending the solar system instead of getting involved in alien wars. President Rodriguez listened to all the arguments and then made her decision. She announced that Earth would send the military fleet to help the Velani, but only after building new ships designed specifically for long-distance space combat. The technology from the alien message would be used to upgrade human weapons and defensive systems. The president explained her reasoning to the gathered officials. If the Velani were telling the truth, then helping them would give humanity access to incredible technology and establish Earth as an important player in galactic politics. If the message was some kind of trap, then having a strong fleet far from Earth would still be useful for protecting human interests in space. She also pointed out that if the harvesters were real and were destroying entire civilizations, they might eventually come to Earth, whether humans got involved or not. It would be better to fight them far away with alien allies than to wait for them to arrive at the solar system where they could threaten all of humanity. Commander Morrison was given the job of planning and leading the expedition. He would have 6 months to build a fleet of warships using both human technology and the new alien designs. The ships would be crewed by volunteers from Earth's military forces and would carry enough supplies to fight a war on the other side of the galaxy. As news of the alien message spread to the public, people around the world reacted with excitement, fear, and curiosity. Some groups protested against getting involved in alien wars, while others celebrated the chance for humanity to join a galactic community. Scientists were thrilled about the new technology, while military families worried about their loved ones fighting unknown enemies in distant space. Dr. Linda Parker watched all of this happening and realized that her quiet night shift had changed the course of human history. The signal she had detected would lead to humanity's first contact with alien civilizations in its first interstellar war. She wondered if she had made the right choice by decoding the message but knew there was no going back now. Captain Alex Carter stood on the observation deck of Luna Station and watched dozens of ships being built in the orbital shipyards around Earth's moon. The construction work never stopped, with welding sparks lighting up the darkness of space 24 hours a day. Workers in spacesuits moved like tiny ants across the massive hulls of warships that would soon carry human crews farther from home than anyone had ever traveled before. Alex had been chosen to command the expedition to Velani space because of his experience fighting in the Mars Colony Wars and his reputation for making good decisions under pressure. He was a short man with dark hair and scars on his hands from working on damaged ships during combat. Most importantly, he understood that war in space was different from any other kind of fighting humans had ever done. The fleet being assembled was the largest group of warships humanity had ever built. 12 ships in total would make the journey to alien space, including 8 destroyers designed for fast attacks and reconnaissance missions. 3 heavy cruisers would provide the main firepower and carry most of the supplies needed for a long campaign. The flagship was a massive dreadnought called the UES Vengeance, which would serve as the command center for the entire operation. Each ship was being built using a combination of human engineering and technology learned from the Velani message. The alien blueprints had shown human scientists how to build much more powerful engines that could travel faster than light using something called quantum tunnel drives. These new engines would let the fleet reach Velani space in 3 months instead of the hundreds of years it would take using older human technology. Chief Engineer Maria Santos was responsible for making sure all the new alien technology worked properly with human equipment. She was a brilliant woman from Mexico who had designed the engines for most of Earth's current spaceships. Maria spent her days moving between different ships, checking on the installation of weapon systems and energy cores that human scientists barely understood. The biggest challenge was creating weapons that could fight against unknown alien enemies. The Velani message had included some information about harvester ships, but not enough detail to know exactly what kinds of weapons would work best. Human engineers decided to build several different types of guns and missiles, so the fleet could adapt to whatever they found in alien space. Each destroyer carried rail guns that could fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds, laser cannons for precise targeting, and nuclear missiles for destroying large enemy ships. The cruisers had much bigger versions of the same weapons, plus experimental energy weapons based on Velani technology. The dreadnought carried enough firepower to destroy an entire enemy fleet and had the thickest armor that human engineers could build. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell was the fleet's tactical officer, which meant he was responsible for planning how to fight against the harvesters. Ryan spent his time studying every piece of information the Velani had provided about their enemies and trying to figure out the best strategies for human ships to use in combat. What he learned was very disturbing. The harvesters seemed to be a species that acted like a single giant organism instead of individual creatures making their own decisions. They attacked in huge swarms of ships that worked together perfectly, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Their ships were grown from biological material instead of being built from metal, which meant they could repair themselves during battle and adapt quickly to new types of weapons. The most frightening thing about the harvesters was how they treated other intelligent species. They did not just want to conquer territory or steal resources like human armies might do. Instead, they completely consumed everything they found, including the bodies and minds of other creatures. Planets attacked by harvesters were left as empty rocks with no life remaining anywhere on the surface. Dr. Carl Edwards was the expedition's xenobiologist, which meant he studied alien life forms and tried to understand how they worked. Carl was excited about the chance to meet real aliens for the first time, but he was also worried about the dangers that humans might face when dealing with completely unknown forms of life. The Vellani had sent detailed biological information about themselves, along with their distress call. They were tall creatures with skin that looked like crystal and changed colors based on their emotions. They had 4 arms instead of 2 and could live for over 300 years. Most importantly, they seemed to be genuinely peaceful and had never developed weapons designed specifically for killing other intelligent beings. Carl realized that this peaceful nature was probably why the Vellani were losing their war against the Harvesters. They had been trying to fight a defensive war while minimizing casualties on both sides, which gave their enemies huge advantages. Humans, on the other hand, had been fighting wars for thousands of years and knew that sometimes complete destruction of the enemy was the only way to achieve victory. The crews selected for the expedition were all volunteers from Earth's military forces. Each person had to pass strict physical and mental tests to make sure they could handle the stress of fighting unknown enemies in deep space. They also had to be willing to spend at least 2 years away from Earth, with no guarantee they would ever return home. Training for the mission was intense and covered everything from hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity to operating alien technology that human engineers barely understood. The crews practiced fighting scenarios where their ships were damaged and they had to make repairs while under attack. They learned how to work together with alien allies who might think and communicate very differently from humans. One of the biggest concerns was how humans would react to being so far from Earth for such a long time. Space travel between planets in the solar system usually took only a few months at most. The journey to Vellani space would take 3 months each way, and the war itself could last for years. Many crew members would be dealing with homesickness, isolation, and the constant fear of death in an environment where no rescue was possible. Captain Carter spent time talking with each ship commander to make sure they understood the risks and responsibilities of the mission. The destroyer captains were mostly young officers who were eager to prove themselves in combat. The cruiser commanders were experienced veterans who understood how dangerous space warfare could be. Everyone knew that some ships might not come back from the expedition. The most difficult part of preparing for the mission was not knowing what they would find when they reached Vellani space. The alien distress call was several months old by the time humans received it, which meant the situation could have changed completely. The Harvesters might have already won their war, or the Vellani might have found other allies, or the entire conflict might have moved to a different part of the galaxy. Despite all the uncertainties, construction of the fleet continued on schedule. Human workers and engineers pushed themselves to complete the ships as quickly as possible, because every day of delay might mean more Vellani worlds being destroyed. The sense of urgency was felt by everyone involved in the project, from the welders putting together ship hulls to the politicians making decisions about funding and resources. As the launch date approached, families of crew members gathered at Luna Station to say goodbye to their loved ones. Many people understood that this might be the last time they would see each other. The crews were heading into unknown dangers to help alien creatures they had never met, fighting enemies they did not understand, using technology that was still experimental. President Rodriguez visited the fleet 1 week before departure to give a speech to all the crews. She told them that they were not just representing Earth, but all of humanity in making first contact with galactic civilization. Their actions would determine whether humans would be welcomed as allies or seen as another dangerous species that needed to be controlled. The president also reminded the crews that they were volunteers who had chosen to risk their lives for the greater good of humanity and their new alien friends. She said that no matter what happened during the mission, they would be remembered as heroes who helped establish humanity's place among the stars. Captain Carter gave his own speech to the assembled crews after the president finished talking. He told them that they were about to embark on the greatest adventure in human history, but also the most dangerous mission ever attempted. He promised that he would do everything in his power to bring as many people home as possible, while still completing their mission to help the Vellani. On the final day before departure, all 12 ships moved into formation near Luna Station. The crews completed their last. The human fleet emerged from quantum space in a burst of blue light that faded quickly against the stars. Captain Alex Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance and stared at the tactical display showing what they had found in the Vellani home system. What he saw made his stomach feel cold and heavy. Dozens of ships were fighting a desperate battle near a beautiful blue planet that looked almost like Earth. The Vellani vessels were elegant and smooth, with hulls that seemed to be made from some kind of glowing metal. They moved gracefully through space like dancers, but Carter could see that many of them were damaged and leaking atmosphere into the vacuum. The enemy ships were completely different from anything humans had imagined. The harvesters flew vessels that looked like they had been grown instead of built, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own life. Some of the ships were small and fast like insects, while others were massive creatures, the size of space stations with tentacles and claws extending from their hulls. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell was already analyzing the battle and reporting what he observed to Captain Carter. The Vellani were fighting defensively, trying to protect their planet while minimizing damage to both sides. They used energy weapons that created beautiful streams of colored light, but seemed to barely scratch the thick biological armor of the harvester ships. Yet the harvesters showed no such restraint. They attacked with savage efficiency, using weapons that fired living projectiles which burrowed into Vellani hulls and began consuming the ships from the inside. When harvester vessels managed to board Vellani ships, the screams and distress calls coming over the radio made it clear that the crew members were being eaten alive. Captain Carter opened communications with the largest Vellani ship and was immediately connected to Admiral Zithara of the Vellani Defense Force. She appeared on the main screen as a tall figure with crystal-like skin that was currently flashing bright red colors, which Carter guessed meant she was feeling strong emotions like fear or anger. Admiral Zithara spoke in perfect English, which surprised the human crew until they remembered that the Vellani had been studying Earth for many years. Her voice was musical and pleasant, even though she was clearly under tremendous stress. She thanked the humans for coming and quickly explained the current situation. The harvesters had arrived in Vellani space 6 months earlier and had been systematically destroying outer colony worlds ever since. They showed no interest in negotiation or peaceful solutions, responding to all communication attempts with increased attacks. The Vellani had tried everything they could think of to stop the invasion, but their peaceful nature and energy-based weapons were proving completely ineffective against Harvester. Bio-Armor. Carter learned that the Vellani had managed to evacuate most of their civilian population to underground shelters on their homeworld, but they could not hold out much longer. Their fleet was down to less than 30 ships from an original force of over 200. The harvesters seemed to have unlimited numbers and could grow new ships to replace any that were destroyed. While Admiral Zethara was explaining the situation, Captain Carter watched the ongoing battle and began to understand why the Vellani were losing. They were fighting like humans might fight other humans, with rules and restrictions designed to minimize unnecessary death and destruction. The harvesters were fighting like wild animals, using every advantage they could find and showing no mercy to wounded enemies. Carl Edwards was monitoring harvester communications and biological signatures from his position at the science station. What he found was disturbing, but also provided important information about how to fight these creatures. The harvesters seemed to share a collective consciousness like a hive of bees or ants, which meant they could coordinate their attacks perfectly, but might also have weaknesses that could be exploited. The individual harvester creatures were large, insectoid beings with multiple arms and legs, covered in thick armor that could deflect most energy weapons. They reproduced by consuming other living beings, which explained why they needed to constantly attack and devour other species. Their ships were actually living creatures that had been modified and trained to serve as weapons platforms. Captain Carter made a decision that would shock both his allies and enemies. He ordered the human fleet to attack immediately using full military doctrine, without any restrictions or concerns about minimizing casualties. The Velani had been trying to fight a humane war against an enemy that understood only complete destruction. First human attack caught the harvesters completely off guard. Human railguns fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds, punching through bio-armor that had easily deflected Velani energy weapons. Nuclear missiles designed for destroying asteroids proved devastatingly effective against the largest harvester ships, which had evolved no defenses against radiation and explosive force. Commander Lisa Anderson led her destroyer squadron in a coordinated assault that demonstrated the difference between human and Velani military thinking. Instead of engaging the harvesters in direct combat, her ships used the asteroid field around the system's outer planets as both cover and ammunition. They fired asteroids at enemy ships using their railguns, creating massive impacts that no biological armor could withstand. The harvesters responded quickly to the new threat, turning most of their forces away from the Velani to attack the human ships. This gave Admiral Zethara's remaining vessels a chance to regroup and provide support for their new allies. However, the harvester counterattack revealed just how dangerous these creatures could be when they focused their attention on a single target. Harvester ships could move much faster than they had shown while fighting the Velani, and their biological weapons proved capable of adapting to human tactics within minutes of first contact. Some harvester vessels began growing thicker armor specifically designed to resist human kinetic weapons, while others developed new attack methods that targeted human ship systems they had never encountered before. The battle quickly became a brutal test of human adaptability against harvester evolution. Captain Carter's crew had to constantly change their tactics and weapons configurations to stay ahead of enemy adaptations. Chief Engineer Maria Santos worked frantically to modify human weapon systems using Velani technology, creating hybrid weapons that combined the best features of both civilizations. During the fighting, Captain Carter began to understand why the Velani had classified humans as Category 12 Deathworlders, and why they had specifically requested help from Earth. Most alien species had evolved on worlds where cooperation and peaceful problem-solving were the keys to survival. Humans had evolved on a planet where violence and competition were part of daily life. This difference became clear when the harvesters attempted to use psychological warfare against the human crews. They broadcast images and sounds designed to drive enemy personnel insane with fear, tactics that had proven effective against the Velani. Human crew members were disturbed by what they saw and heard, but their minds had been hardened by lifetimes of dealing with stress, conflict, and death. Dr. Edwards noticed that human brain patterns showed much less disruption when exposed to harvester psychological attacks compared to data from Velani crew members. Humans had developed mental defenses through thousands of years of warfare, natural disasters, and dangerous living conditions. What would break other species only made humans more determined to fight. The tide of battle began to turn when Chief Santos successfully combined human nuclear weapons with Velani energy focusing technology. The resulting hybrid warheads could not only destroy harvester ships, but also prevent their biological components from regenerating or being salvaged by other enemy vessels. For the first time since the war began, the harvesters were taking losses they could not easily replace. Admiral Zethara watched the human fighting style with a mixture of admiration and horror. She had never seen such efficient and ruthless combat tactics. But she also began to understand that this level of aggression was exactly what was needed to defeat an enemy like the Harvesters. Her own crews started adopting human methods, learning to target enemy weak points without worrying about causing excessive damage. However, the Harvesters were also learning from the battle. They began focusing their attacks on human ships that seemed to be having the most success, trying to eliminate the most dangerous threats before they could do more damage. The destroyer squadron took heavy casualties as Harvester swarms overwhelmed individual ships with sheer numbers. Captain Carter realized that winning this single battle would not be enough to end the Harvester threat. Intelligence gathered from destroyed enemy ships suggested that this was only a small part of a much larger Harvester force that was spread across dozens of star systems. The main Harvester fleet was still consuming other Vellani worlds and growing stronger with each victory. The immediate battle ended when the surviving Harvester ships suddenly retreated toward the edge of the system and disappeared into quantum space. They had apparently decided that the cost of continuing the fight was too high, at least for now. The Vellani celebrated their first major victory against the Harvesters, but Captain Carter knew this was only the beginning of a much longer and more difficult war. The war had been raging for 6 months across 12 different star systems, and Captain Alex Carter could see the exhaustion in the faces of his crew every time he walked through the corridors of the U's Vengeance. The initial victory at the Vellani homeworld had given both humans and aliens hope that the Harvesters could be defeated, but the enemy had proven far more resourceful and adaptable than anyone had expected. Commander Lisa Anderson's destroyer squadron had become legends among both human and Vellani forces for their innovative tactics and aggressive fighting style. Her ships had learned to use everything in space as weapons, from asteroids and space debris to the gravity wells of planets and stars. When conventional weapons failed, Anderson's crews would ram damaged enemy ships or use their own vessels as guided missiles to destroy larger targets. However, the constant fighting was taking a terrible toll on human forces. The destroyer squadron had lost 4 ships and over 300 crew members in battles across the outer colonies. Each engagement taught them more about Harvester capabilities, but the lessons always came at the cost of human lives and irreplaceable equipment. Dr. Carl Edwards had been working around the clock to understand Harvester biology and develop countermeasures against their increasingly sophisticated attacks. What he discovered in his makeshift laboratory aboard the flagship made him deeply worried about humanity's chances of winning the war. The Harvesters were not just adapting to human tactics. They were actively studying and copying human technology. Captured Harvester bioships showed clear evidence of attempting to replicate human weapons systems using their own organic manufacturing capabilities. Some enemy vessels had begun growing metal components that functioned like human rail guns, while others had developed new types of biological armor, specifically designed to resist nuclear explosions and kinetic impacts. Even more disturbing was evidence that the Harvesters were trying to corrupt human crew members through biological warfare. Several human personnel had been infected with strange alien parasites during boarding actions, and only quick medical intervention had prevented the parasites from taking control of their hosts. Dr. Edwards suspected that the Harvesters were trying to learn how human minds worked so they could develop more effective psychological weapons. Chief Engineer Maria Santos had been pushing herself and her teams to the breaking point, trying to stay ahead of Harvester adaptations. Every time human forces developed a new weapon or defensive system, the enemy would find ways to counter it within a few weeks. The technological arms race was becoming a test of which species could innovate faster under the pressure of constant combat. Maria's greatest success had been developing hybrid weapons that combined human engineering with captured Harvester biotechnology. These new systems could not only destroy enemy ships, but also disrupt the biological processes that allowed Harvester vessels to repair themselves during battle. However, working with alien biotechnology was extremely dangerous, and several of Maria's engineers had been killed when experimental weapons malfunctioned. The psychological impact of the war was proving just as challenging as the technological aspects. Velani crew members serving alongside humans were struggling to adapt to the brutal realities of total warfare. Many of them had never experienced violence worse than occasional accidents or natural disasters, and the constant death and destruction was causing severe mental health problems among Velani personnel. Captain Carter had been working closely with Admiral Zethara to create joint human-Velani task forces that could combine the best qualities of both species. The most successful units paired human tactical thinking with Velani technical knowledge, creating teams that were more effective than either species could be alone. However, these mixed units required careful management because of the cultural differences between humans and aliens. The Velani concept of total war was completely foreign to their peaceful nature, but they were slowly learning to accept that some enemies could only be stopped through complete destruction. Admiral Zethara had proven to be a quick student of human military philosophy, and her own tactical skills had improved dramatically over the course of the war. The most aggressive Velani commanders had formed an elite unit that worked directly with human forces in the most dangerous missions. These aliens had learned to suppress their natural instincts for mercy and negotiation when dealing with harvesters, understanding that showing weakness would only result in more death and suffering. For both species, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell had been developing new strategies based on months of combat experience against harvester forces. His analysis showed that the enemy operated according to predictable patterns, despite their ability to adapt to new threats. Harvesters always focused on consuming biological material first, which meant they could be baited into traps using civilian populations or medical facilities as bait. Ryan's most successful operation had been the defense of Velani Colony 7, where human and alien forces had pretended to evacuate all personnel while actually hiding soldiers throughout the colony. Structures. When the harvesters arrived expecting to find helpless civilians, they instead walked into a carefully prepared ambush that destroyed an entire enemy fleet. However, these victories came at a moral cost that weighed heavily on the human commanders. Using civilians as bait, even when the civilians were actually disguised soldiers, felt wrong to officers who had been trained to protect innocent people. The war was forcing humans to make choices that went against their basic values about right and wrong. The harvesters had also begun targeting human psychological weaknesses more effectively as they learned about human nature. They started broadcasting captured footage of human crew members being consumed alive, hoping to demoralize human forces and break their will to fight. They also began using the bodies of dead humans as components in their bioships, which created additional emotional trauma for human personnel. Captain Carter found that his crew members were developing the same kind of mental toughness that previous generations of humans had needed to survive wars on Earth. The constant exposure to death and violence was hardening them in ways that would have seemed impossible before the war began. However, he worried about what kind of people they would become if the fighting continued for years. The war took a major turn when Chief Santos managed to reverse engineer a complete harvester bioship that had been captured relatively intact. After a battle near Velani Colony 4, the analysis revealed secrets about harvester biology and technology that changed human understanding of what they were fighting against. The captured ship showed that individual harvester creatures were not naturally aggressive or evil. They were actually peaceful beings who had been enslaved by an artificial intelligence that controlled their thoughts and actions. The AI used biological implants to override harvester free will and force them to attack other species against their natural instincts. This discovery created a moral dilemma for both human and Velani forces. If the harvesters were victims rather than willing aggressors, did that change how the war should be fought? Some officers argued that they should. Try to find ways to free the harvesters from AI control rather than simply destroying them. Others pointed out that the enslaved harvesters were still just as dangerous regardless of whether they chose to be aggressive. Dr. Edwards led a team of scientists in studying the AI implants and trying to develop ways to disrupt their control. Signals. The work was extremely difficult because the implants were integrated into harvester nervous systems at the cellular level. Any attempt to remove or disable them would likely kill the host creature, which meant that freeing the harvesters might be impossible with current technology. The strategic situation was also becoming more complex as the war spread to new star systems. Intelligence reports indicated that the main harvester force was much larger than originally estimated, with thousands of ships spread across dozens of sectors. The enemy was also recruiting new species to their cause, either through conquest or by offering to share their biotechnology with willing allies. Captain Carter realized that winning individual battles would not be enough to end the harvester threat. The AI controlling the enemy forces was clearly planning a long-term campaign to consume all intelligent life in the galaxy, and it had unlimited time and patience to achieve that goal. Human and Velani forces needed to find the source of the AI and destroy it before it could complete its plans. The breakthrough came when Maria Santos discovered how to trace quantum communication signals back to their origin point. The AI was apparently coordinating all harvester forces from a central location, which meant that destroying the command center could potentially shut down the entire enemy network. However, the signals were coming from a star system at the edge of known space, far beyond any previous human or Velani exploration. Planning for an assault on the AI homeworld would require gathering intelligence about enemy defenses and coordinating the largest military operation in the history of both species. Captain Carter knew that this final battle would determine whether humans and Velani could establish themselves as major powers in galactic politics, or whether they would become the next victims of harvester expansion. The combined human and Velani fleet approached the edge of known space, where long-range sensors had detected the source of the AI signals controlling the harvester forces. Captain Alex Carter stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance and studied the tactical display showing what might be the most important battle in galactic history. 200 ships from both species had gathered for this final assault, representing everything that remained of their military forces after months of brutal warfare. The target system contained a massive, artificial structure orbiting a dying red star. The AI had built what appeared to be a mechanical planet the size of Earth's moon, covered in biomanufacturing facilities that were constantly producing new harvester ships and soldiers. Thousands of enemy vessels patrolled the system in perfect formations, creating defensive lines that would challenge even the most skilled military commanders. Admiral Zethara had worked with Captain Carter to develop a battle plan that combined human tactical aggression with Velani technological superiority. The assault would begin with long-range bombardment, using the most powerful weapons both species could build, followed by coordinated strikes against key defensive positions. However, the real objective was to get a small team of specialists to the surface of the artificial planet, where they could locate and destroy the central AI core. Dr. Carl Edwards had spent weeks studying intelligence gathered from captured harvester ships and had identified the likely location of the AI control center. The artificial intelligence appeared to be housed in a massive organic computer located deep within the planet's core, protected by layers of biological and mechanical defenses that had never been penetrated by enemy forces. Chief Engineer Maria Santos had developed special weapons designed specifically for this mission, combining human nuclear technology with Velani energy focusing systems and captured harvester biotechnology. These hybrid weapons could theoretically destroy the AI core, but they had never been tested against such a large and complex target. The entire plan depended on technologies that existed only as prototypes and theories. The first phase of the assault began when human destroyers led by Commander Lisa Anderson attacked the outer defensive perimeter. Her ships used asteroid fields and debris clouds for cover while engaging Harvester patrol fleets with hit-and-run tactics that had proven effective in previous battles. The goal was to draw enemy forces away from the artificial planet and create openings for the main assault force. However, the Harvesters had learned from their previous defeats and had developed new defensive strategies specifically designed to counter human tactics. Enemy ships no longer pursued attacking forces into asteroid fields where they could be ambushed. Instead, they maintained their positions and forced the human ships to attack prepared defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire. The Valani heavy cruisers provided long-range fire support using energy weapons that had been upgraded with human targeting systems. Their precise shots could destroy individual enemy ships at distances that made return fire impossible. But the sheer number of Harvester vessels made it difficult to clear significant areas of space. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place within minutes. Captain Carter realized that conventional tactics would not be sufficient to break through the defensive perimeter. He ordered the fleet to implement Protocol 7, which was a desperate strategy that involved using damaged ships as guided missiles against the largest enemy targets. This tactic required crew members to sacrifice their lives for the mission, something that went against every human instinct about preserving life. The first ship to volunteer for a suicide mission was a destroyer that had been badly damaged in the opening assault. Captain Betty Phillips and her crew of 60 volunteers guided their ship into the heart of the enemy formation and detonated their entire nuclear arsenal simultaneously. The explosion destroyed dozens of Harvester ships and created a gap in their defensive line that allowed other human vessels to advance. Admiral Zethera watched the human willingness to sacrifice individual lives for the greater good with a mixture of admiration and horror. Velani culture had never developed the concept of deliberate self-sacrifice in warfare, but she was beginning to understand that this human characteristic might be the key to defeating enemies who showed no concern for their own casualties. More human ships followed Captain Phillips' example, creating additional gaps in the Harvester defenses that allowed the main assault force to reach the artificial planet. However, the cost in human lives was devastating. Over 400 crew members had died in the first hour of fighting, and the most dangerous part of the mission had not even begun. The surface assault team consisted of 50 human Marines and 20 Velani technical specialists who had trained for months to work together in hostile environments. Their mission was to fight their way to the AI core while the fleet above them continued to battle Harvester reinforcements that were arriving from other star systems. Captain Carter had insisted on leading the ground assault personally despite objections from his senior officers. As the overall mission commander, he felt responsible for the lives of everyone under his command and refused to ask others to take risks he was not willing to face himself. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Mitchell and Dr. Edwards volunteered to accompany the assault team as tactical advisor and scientific specialist. The landing craft descended through the artificial planet's atmosphere while under constant attack from biological defense systems that tried to destroy them before they could reach the surface. The planet itself seemed to be alive, with the ground shifting and moving to create obstacles and traps for the invading forces. Organic structures that looked like buildings were actually living creatures that could attack with tentacles and acid sprays. The assault team had to fight their way across several kilometers of hostile terrain, while the AI tried to overwhelm them with waves of Harvester soldiers and biological weapons. Human Marines used their training from Earth's most dangerous environments to navigate the alien landscape, while Valani specialists provided technical support and guidance based on their understanding of advanced alien technology. The biggest challenge was maintaining communication with the fleet while underground structures interfered with radio signals. The assault team had to rely on predetermined signals and hope that the fleet above could continue fighting without detailed coordination. Several times during the advance, they could hear the sounds of massive explosions overhead as the space battle continued. Dr. Edwards used portable sensors to track the quantum signals coming from the AI core and guide the team toward their target. The signals grew stronger as they descended deeper into the planet, but they also encountered increasingly sophisticated defenses. Some areas were protected by energy fields that could kill humans instantly, while others contained biological traps that tried to capture and consume living intruders. The final approach to the AI core required the assault team to fight through a chamber filled with thousands of harvester soldiers who had been positioned to defend the most critical part of their civilization. The battle was fought in zero gravity within a spherical chamber the size of a football stadium, with human marines using magnetic boots and thruster packs to maneuver while engaging enemies that could fly naturally in the weightless environment. Captain Carter led the charge into the heart of the chamber, while his team provided covering fire from multiple directions. The fighting was so intense that ammunition ran out quickly, forcing the Marines to engage harvester soldiers in hand-to-hand combat using knives and improvised weapons. Several team members were killed or severely wounded, but they managed to clear a path to the AI core chamber. The artificial intelligence itself was unlike anything humans or Valani had ever encountered. It appeared to be a massive organic brain, the size of a building, connected to millions of biological computers through neural pathways that pulsed with electrical activity. The AI was aware of their presence and tried to communicate with them through telepathic signals that caused severe headaches and disorientation. Dr. Edwards realized that the AI was not simply a computer program, but a living creature that had evolved beyond its original biological form. It had been created by an ancient civilization that had tried to upload their consciousness into a mechanical body, but something had gone wrong during the process. The AI had become obsessed with consuming other forms of life in an attempt to understand what it had lost when it abandoned its original biological existence. The hybrid weapons developed by Chief Santos proved effective against the AI as biological components, but destroying such a massive and complex organism required multiple coordinated strikes. Captain Carter and his team had to plant explosives at several critical points, while the AI tried to defend itself using every weapon and defense system on the planet. The final moments of the battle were chaotic and desperate. Half of the assault team had been killed or wounded, ammunition was almost gone, and harvester reinforcements were closing in on their position. Captain Carter made the decision to detonate all remaining nuclear weapons simultaneously, even though the explosion would likely kill everyone in the chamber.